I still remember the way my mother's voice cut through the kitchen that morning like a blade. "You'll never make it on your own, Emma. You're not built for that kind of life." My brother Michael laughed from behind his coffee mug, the sound sharp and dismissive. "You can't even cook scrambled eggs properly, and you want to move out and live alone." Their laughter filled the room, casual and cruel, like they were discussing the weather. I stood there clutching my small suitcase, feeling my throat tighten. It wasn't just about leaving home. It was about proving I could stand on my own 2 feet, even though every person in that kitchen believed I'd fall flat on my face within a week. That morning felt like attending the funeral of my own confidence. I'd made toast for everyone as a goodbye gesture, trying to show I could at least do something right. My mother took one bite and tossed it aside, muttering something about how dry and tasteless it was. When I finally said goodbye, she didn't even bother looking up from her newspaper. "Don't call us when it all falls apart," she said flatly, turning the page. "Because it will." I nodded, forcing a smile that hurt my face. "I won't call," I promised, my voice barely above a whisper. But as soon as I stepped outside into the cold morning air, my chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. The world suddenly felt enormous and terrifying, and I had absolutely no safety net to catch me if I fell. My first apartment was a tiny, cramped space above a laundromat on the rough side of town. The walls were permanently stained with water damage, and everything smelled like industrial detergent mixed with mildew. The heater rattled violently through the night, making sounds like someone was trapped inside the vents. I worked at a small greasy diner downtown called Rose's, waiting tables for customers who barely acknowledged my existence. Every single night, I dragged myself home exhausted, my feet aching and my uniform smelling like old cooking oil. But something stubborn inside me refused to give up and prove them right. Their voices echoed constantly in my mind, especially during the hardest moments, daring me to fail so they could say they'd told me so. 2 months after I moved out, the diner closed without any warning. The owner just locked the doors one Tuesday morning and disappeared. My final paycheck bounced, leaving me with $17 in my bank account and rent due in 5 days. I spent that entire night crying into my pillow, whispering to myself in the darkness, "They were right. I can't do this. I should just go home." But when morning came, something shifted inside me. I woke up angry, not at my family anymore, but at the pathetic idea that their cruel words could define who I was and what I could become. So I put on my only clean shirt, the blue one with the small coffee stain I couldn't quite get out, and I went job hunting with determination I didn't know I possessed. At a small cafe 3 blocks down the street, the owner noticed me immediately. Her name was Grace, and she was in her 60s with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. "You look like you desperately need a break, sweetheart," she said softly, studying my tired face. She hired me on the spot without even asking for references. Grace was completely different from anyone in my family. She was patient, calm, and genuinely kind. She never asked intrusive questions about my past or why I looked so defeated. She just believed I could learn and grow. And for the first time in my entire life, I started believing it too. Working for Grace felt like someone had finally turned on a light in a room I'd been stumbling through in the dark. Working at Grace's cafe felt like therapy I didn't know I needed. She taught me everything from scratch with endless patience. How to handle difficult customers without losing my composure. How to balance the register at closing time. How to make perfect espresso foam. How to bake pastries that melted in your mouth. Each week, she introduced something new, never overwhelming me but always pushing me forward. "You've got a genuinely good head for business," she told me one quiet afternoon, smiling warmly over her reading glasses. That single sentence ignited something inside me that I thought my family had completely extinguished. It was hope, fragile but growing stronger every day. Late at night after closing the cafe, when Grace had gone home and I was alone with the quiet hum of the refrigerators, I'd sit at the counter sketching ideas in an old notebook. Cafe logos with swirling designs. Menu layouts with creative names. Floor plans showing where tables and chairs could go. Decor ideas involving hanging plants and warm lighting. I didn't fully realize it then, but I was planting seeds for my future, nurturing a dream I was almost too scared to name out loud. I wanted my own cafe someday, not anything fancy or pretentious, just a warm place that felt like home and hope mixed together. One rainy Thursday evening, Grace asked me to stay after we closed. We sat together at a corner table, and she folded her hands carefully before speaking. "I'm retiring, Emma," she said gently, watching my face. "My daughter wants me to move closer to her family in Oregon. I'm selling the cafe." My heart dropped straight into my stomach. This place had saved me, and now it was disappearing. I wanted to beg her not to go, but before I could speak, she smiled that knowing smile of hers. "You've learned enough to start your own place now," she said with absolute confidence. "I've been watching you, honey. You're ready." Her faith in me was the push I didn't even know I desperately needed. I went to the bank the very next morning and withdrew every single dollar I'd managed to save, which came to exactly $3,200. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I found a dusty, abandoned corner space on Elm Street that nobody wanted because it needed so much work. The walls were badly cracked, the floor was uneven and stained, and there was no functioning equipment anywhere. But when I stood in that empty space, I could see exactly what it could become. I could see customers laughing, smell fresh coffee brewing, hear gentle music playing. I signed the lease that same day, my hand shaking as I wrote my name. I decided to call it Hearth and Bloom. People said the name sounded too poetic and flowery for a simple coffee shop. I told them it was supposed to be poetic because that's exactly what I was trying to create. The first few weeks after opening were absolutely brutal in ways I hadn't prepared for. I worked 16-hour days minimum, doing absolutely everything myself. Baking muffins at 4 in the morning. Brewing endless pots of coffee. Mopping floors until my back screamed. Scrubbing dishes until my hands were raw and bleeding. There were terrible days when I sold only 2 cups of coffee in 8 hours, standing behind the counter fighting back tears. But every single time I wanted to quit and call my mother to admit defeat, I heard her voice in my head saying I'd never make it. And that voice, cruel as it was, kept me going. I refused to prove them right. I refused to give them that satisfaction. Then one quiet Tuesday afternoon, everything changed in a way I never expected. A young woman came in carrying a camera and a notebook. She was a local food blogger with a decent following. She ordered a cinnamon roll I'd made that morning and a vanilla latte. I watched nervously as she took her first bite, and her eyes actually widened with surprise. "Oh my God," she said. "This is incredible." She stayed for an hour, taking pictures and asking questions about my recipes and my story. That night, she posted a glowing review with beautiful photos, and by morning it had been shared hundreds of times. When I arrived to open the cafe the next day, there was actually a line stretching down the block. I stood behind the counter, tears threatening to spill over, whispering to myself in disbelief, "It's actually happening. This is really happening." Within just a few months, Hearth and Bloom became the favorite gathering spot in our entire neighborhood. I hired 3 staff members, all young people who reminded me of myself. I upgraded the ancient kitchen equipment with proper ovens and espresso machines. I bought comfortable mismatched furniture from thrift stores and estate sales. Grace visited one sunny afternoon, and when she walked in and saw what I'd created, she actually cried. "I knew you'd make it, kid," she said, hugging me tightly. "I always knew." I hugged her back, silently thanking her for seeing potential in me that my own family had completely missed or chosen to ignore. For 3 long years, I didn't hear a single word from my family. Not one phone call. Not even a text message on my birthday or Christmas. In the beginning, I used to check my phone constantly, hoping my mother would ask how I was doing or if I was eating properly. But month after month of silence became its own kind of answer, clear and painful. Eventually, I stopped waiting for their approval or even their acknowledgement. I built my life without them, brick by brick, cup of coffee by cup of coffee. And honestly, it felt liberating in a way I hadn't expected. Then one ordinary Tuesday morning, everything shifted again. A local journalist wrote a feature article for the city magazine titled "From Completely Broke to Full Bloom, the inspiring woman behind the town's favorite cafe." The article included a beautiful photo of me standing proudly in front of my hand-painted sign, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. That exact same day, barely 2 hours after the magazine hit newsstands, my phone rang with a number I'd almost deleted 100 times. It was my mother. "I saw you in the magazine," she said quietly, her voice strange and uncertain. "You've done very well for yourself." Her tone wasn't pride exactly. It was surprise mixed with something else I couldn't quite identify. Maybe regret. 3 weeks later, my younger sister called completely out of nowhere. We hadn't spoken since I'd left home. Mom wants you to come visit, she said carefully, like she was walking on broken glass. We're kind of going through a tough spot right now. My chest immediately tightened with old familiar anxiety. 4 years, I'd secretly dreamed of the day they'd reach out and apologize, wanting to reconnect. But I'd never imagined it would happen like this, when they needed something from me. When I finally drove up to my childhood home on a grey Saturday afternoon, I barely recognized it. The paint was peeling badly, exposing raw wood underneath. The porch light flickered weakly like it might die at any moment. The lawn was overgrown with weeds. Inside, my brother Michael sat at the kitchen table with his head buried in his hands, looking 10 years older than when I'd last seen him. The family business they'd always bragged about so loudly, the one they'd said was so much more secure than my foolish cafe dreams, had gone completely bankrupt. They'd lost everything. I wanted to feel vindicated and satisfied. I wanted to feel like justice had been served. But standing there looking at their defeated faces, I didn't feel triumphant at all. I just felt sad and empty. Over a quiet, awkward dinner of takeout Chinese food nobody really wanted, my mother finally said the words I'd waited years to hear. We were wrong, Emma. About everything we said to you. Her voice actually cracked when she said the word wrong, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. For just a moment, I didn't see the harsh woman who'd mocked my dreams and laughed at my ambitions. I saw someone tired, human, vulnerable, and genuinely scared about their future. Someone who'd made terrible mistakes and finally realized it. She hesitated for a long moment, staring down at her untouched plate, before asking the question I knew was coming. Could you maybe help us? With the mortgage on the house? We're 3 months behind and the bank is threatening foreclosure. The air in that kitchen went completely still. I looked slowly around the table at the faces that had once mocked me so cruelly, told me I'd fail, laughed at my stupid dreams. And I realized with startling clarity that I held all the power now. Their future was literally in my hands. But strangely, revenge didn't interest me anymore. The fantasy of watching them beg had sustained me through hard times, but now that it was actually happening, it felt hollow. What interested me now was growth, healing, and becoming someone better than the people who'd hurt me. I told her honestly that I needed time to think about such a big decision. That night, I sat alone on the same porch where I'd cried before leaving home 3 years earlier, and something profound hit me with the force of a wave. I wasn't that scared, broken girl anymore. That version of Emma had died and been reborn into someone stronger. Helping them financially wouldn't make me weak or stupid. It wouldn't mean they'd been right all along. It would actually make me free from the bitterness that had been slowly poisoning me. It would prove I'd become someone capable of grace. 1 month later, after carefully reviewing my cafe's finances with my accountant, I sent them enough money to catch up on their mortgage and clear their most pressing bills. When my brother Michael called to thank me, his voice broke completely and he actually started crying on the phone. You didn't have to do this, he whispered. After everything we said to you, after how we treated you, you had every right to let us lose everything. I know I didn't have to, I replied calmly. That's exactly why it matters. Because I chose to help, not because I was obligated. There was a long silence before he said quietly, I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry for not believing in you. Slowly, carefully, like learning to walk after a terrible injury, things began to change between us. My mother started visiting Hearth and Bloom on Sunday mornings. She'd sit by the window with a cappuccino and one of my cinnamon rolls, watching customers come and go. You built something truly beautiful here, Emma, she told me one morning, her eyes watering. Every single time she said something like that, I'd smile and answer, so did you, Mom. It just took us both a while to see it properly. And I meant it. She'd built a family, even if she'd done it imperfectly. When I opened my second cafe location across town 8 months later, my entire family attended the grand opening launch party. We took a photo together, all of us smiling in front of the new sign. These were the exact same people who'd once told me I couldn't make it, who'd laughed at my dreams, who'd expected me to come crawling back within weeks. Only this time, standing there with my arm around my mother, I realized something important. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need them to validate my success or tell me I'd done well. Their presence was enough. Their willingness to show up and celebrate with me was enough. A few weeks after the opening, I found a letter in my mailbox. It was from my mother, written in her careful handwriting on cream-colored stationery. Dear Emma, it began. I was hard on you because I genuinely thought protecting you meant keeping you close to home where I could watch over you. I thought the world was too cruel and you were too fragile. I see now that I was wrong about everything. What I called protection was actually me holding you back from your potential. I'm so proud of you, Emma. Not because you're successful, but because you became kind despite everything. Love, Mom. I cried for a long time after reading those words, holding that letter like it was made of gold. Now, when I close up Hearth and Bloom at night and I'm alone in the quiet space, I look around at the warm golden lights and breathe in the lingering smell of cinnamon and fresh coffee. Every single brick in these walls, every cup served, every smile exchanged with a customer, every early morning and late night represents something precious. This life was built from absolutely nothing but courage, determination, and stubborn refusal to accept their vision of who I was supposed to be. And that's something nobody can ever take away from me, no matter what happens. Sometimes, people who know my story ask if I've truly forgiven my family for those cruel words and that painful rejection. The honest truth is yes, I have forgiven them completely. Because I learned that forgiveness isn't weakness or pretending the hurt never happened. Forgiveness is proof that you've healed enough to release the poison. They once said with absolute certainty that I'd fail without them, that I needed their guidance and support to survive. Now they come to me for help when they are struggling. And every single time I hand them a cup of coffee or sit with them at a table in my cafe, I do it with a genuine smile. Because I discovered that success feels sweetest not when you're gloating over the people who doubted you, but when you're generous enough to share it with them anyway.